All right. Hello, everyone. Let's open with a short prayer, and then we can continue our Q&A session. Dear Lord, at the beginning of this second hour, I pray that you guide and direct our thoughts and our conversation through your Holy Spirit. I ask this in Jesus' name. All right. Perhaps it's good to do a short summary of what we did the last hour, and then we can go into our Q&A session. We looked into the line of Panium to the Sunday Law. That was the original line that I started to present in January this year. But before we went there, I wanted us to look into the history that led up to 2021, and especially in relation to the King of the North and the King of the South. And we see that as soon as the United States gets into power here, no, I should say differently. We see as soon as the King of the South falls in 1991, 1989 to 1991, we see that the United States takes advantage of this unilateral power. It uses and misuses that power in this time period. But we also recognize that after 9/11 and some mistakes that the USA makes, that they get restrained by the rise of the King of the South and perhaps also other authoritarian regimes like China's, I think, also taking advantage of that situation. But especially here, we're looking at the King of the South, we're looking at Russia rise in power in the number of spheres of influence it has, but also in winning the narrative, winning the information war that is going on in this time period. The USA is way behind in battling the information warfare. It's only in 2018 where they update the cyber strategy, for example, that was outdated for maybe 2 decades, and they updated it because before they didn't think it was necessary, but because of the Russian intervening in the election of 2016 that came out, suddenly they started to realize, like, hey, Russia's doing something and we are way behind. But I continued for a while, and then that is the context of the situation when we enter in 2021 and the beginning of this crisis in Ukraine. This is where the point where we mark 2021, where Biden needs to make a decision, and he realizes that, first of all, America lost credibility of the problems they made in Iraq, and secondly, Putin lost a lot of gained a lot of confidence and trust within the world, within the Western world, within Europe, that Biden realized in 2021 that it was very difficult to convince the rest of the world and to convince its allies of the fact that Putin was actually an untrustworthy partner, that Putin was actually about to invade Ukraine with full-scale invasion. So Biden starts to tell the story and he makes a decision to change that situation, to step in and do something about it, because the previous presidents didn't do much of intervention. Of course, Barack Obama was still dealing with Afghanistan and stuff like that, but he didn't go in there himself. It was just dealing with a war that was already going on. But really entering into a new area was intervening in a conflict was rare in this time period, and Biden now decides we're going to intervene. We need to do something about it, and he runs into the risk of perhaps misleading the world again. Perhaps the information he has is false or incomplete, or but he takes that position, and he takes the position to now change and win that story, win that information battle, and now says you cannot trust Putin. We need to do something about this. It takes the world to realize that only when the invasion actually happens, then they give their credits to Biden and say like, you were right. Um, we marked that in 2022. And this is also the point where Putin starts to be in trouble, because at Penium, we also mark the beginning of the downfall of the King of the South. Um, we can mark it internally, perhaps, but also externally. I think Penium is the downfall of the King of the South. And even though it is invisible at Penny himself, it's a Boston, but we can see it here. We can see it in 2022. Putin brought himself into a lot of trouble. And the only one who can fix that problem for him is the King of the North. It's the USA. And the first attempt, or the first start of the King of the North to do that, is in 2024, with the visits and the calls that were made to ask Putin, are you open for a ceasefire? Are you open for talks and negotiations? And Putin was open to that. But the King of the North, or at least Trump, was not in official power. So they needed to wait for him to be in official power to solve that problem. And solving the problem started in February this year. But this has been my line, or the line that I presented in January. And the premise that I made in that study was, it was in a response to what Elder Terry did thus far since last year until January, is that she has been focusing a lot on the National Sunday Law, on the Sunday Law waymark, with primarily, I guess, the Quintus Fabius Maximus Gregorius study. She elaborated on that. She built that. She expanded it, developed it. But up to that point, I missed a story that from Panium to the Sunday Law. There was a bigger story that started in 2014. That's the story she has been telling, which is a good and a nice story, and I can see that. But I missed the story from Boston, Concord, and Exeter. There were some, yes, Concord is the overturning of Roe v. Wade. In the beginning, there was no Exeter, and later an Exeter was developed, which was May 30. So there were some dates, there were some events marked, but the story to connect those dates, I don't think was made that far. And I think the first time I heard it was actually yesterday when Elder Terry spoke for the Canadian ministry. And I think I heard her did this for the first time, and it actually made sense to me. So I recommend people to watch that series. So that has been my premise. Like, hey, if we're going to talk about the Sunday Law, and maybe it was wrong to say it, but I said we cannot understand the Sunday Law if you don't understand those waymarks. So at the moment, it feels to me, and that was my problem in the beginning at least, it's like we all seem to understand the Sunday Law, and we all understand the park and the event that is the Sunday Law. But we have no clue about actually what 2021 or Boston or whatever it is, or even have a story that connects those waymarks. I think in the last 2 months, this message has been developing. Elder Terry has developed her message, and the thread that she makes, the story that she makes, becomes clearer. Also yesterday with those waymarks. So I think we're getting there, but that has been the problem that I wanted to resolve, at least in my mind. So like, hey, okay, we seem to understand the Sunday Law, but hey, shouldn't we first go back and see a little bit of what happens before to even understand, to be able to understand the Sunday Law? So what I did, and that was not answering that question, but what I did is I went to the Eastern Front study, and I did Boston, Concord, and Exeter on the Eastern Front. But I actually asked for the same thing, but on the Western Front. And for my personally, I think I've seen that for the first time yesterday in her study. So again, a little bit of background, a little bit of review. I know that the message also has developed through the last months in answering questions. So Fiji, I think, was an important um camp meeting where Elder Terry introduced the thought that basically what she said is, Arjan, aren't you predicting, because I said this is the national Sunday law, but aren't you actually predicting the worldwide Sunday law? Is this not what the worldwide Sunday law looks like? Actually, what she started to introduce as that is going to be the death of the king of the south, the end of the king of the south, or the final end of Russia. Um, so these are thoughts and ideas that have been introduced, and I needed to deal with as well, and still deal with. Also, the fact that Russia's fall is first internal and then external. I guess you may have heard that as well. So that from 2021 to national Sunday law and worldwide Sunday law, this is internal, and this is an external fall. So Elder Terry has been emphasizing the internal fall of Russia here, and emphasizing the death of Navalny, for example, in 2024, and that this would be the external fall of Russia in this time period. And she got that from comparing and contrasting with the King of the North. So here we see a rise of the Seventh Kingdom internally. So you have an agitation of the Sunday law internally within the United States. And then we see a rise of that same kingdom, but now worldwide. So that's actually what you see right now in the world, where we see the Trump administration troubling the rest of the world and trying to get the rest of the world in line with the USA, basically, and obeying, or how do you say it? Obeying and get them in line with the USA. So that here at the end, also the USA is the sole unilateral power, and the rest of the world just obeys that king. So first internal, then external. So this has been introduced by Elder Terry as well, and something that needs to be dealt with. And I think I think it's a simplified model, but I think it is correct. The issue that I need to deal with is I have been presenting on this time period, and I've been talking about external events and the external fall of the King of the South. So the things of 2022, 2021, 2022, 2024, they are events. They happened. We cannot ignore these events. The only thing that we need to find out is what story do they tell and what do they predict, basically. Because although we mark an internal fall here, there's also external events taking place. And I think this external fall is beginning here as well, just as I already marked in 2021, the external rise of the Seventh Kingdom starts as well. So with Biden taking the position, winning this narrative, taking the position of we are taking control of the situation. That was 2021. So externally, Eastern Front, we see already a rise of the Seventh Kingdom in 2021. So I'm suggesting that also external fall of the King of the South is introduced already also in 2021. But that doesn't neglect this model of internal and external. So these are some of the ideas that I wanted to lay next to my study, and maybe we can have some discussion about that as well.
I know there's a couple of hands up if you're right. I know Victoria was waiting from last time, and then Fel has his hand up, and then Mary.
No, I can go last. I was just gonna point out that there were Belle and Mary.
Okay, I can't see hands. Is that? But who's first?
Chat, old school way.
Oh, chat. Oh, I'm sorry.
Old school. No problem. Oh, another hand just came up too, so.
That's
Good
a
morning,
lot of.
Arjan.
So H means hand.
Yeah,
Hi, good morning.
this is Fel.
Hi.
Yeah, I really appreciate your your presentation and all the research and the time that you took to do this. And I have been watching your other presentations. And so the question, I've been in the movement, Logina and I, we've been in the movement since 2019. So we're still fairly newbies. And, I don't know all the rules, and this is very complicated. You got your internal, external to think about. You got your Eastern Front, Western Front to think about. And but one of the questions that I did ask myself when Elder Terry presented the Sunday Law, July 18th, one of the questions that what I had is, where's the, shouldn't what happened to the Boston, Concord, Exeter? Because that to me was not clear. So I just kept that in the back of my mind. What happened to those waymarks? And I thought, okay, maybe I know she's working on it, so she'll present it along the way. But that's one of my own questions that I had to myself. And so, like I said, when we came in 2019, there was Elder Jeff was still here, and there was a discussion on July. And like I said, because we just came in, we didn't know what that was all about. But something like Elder Jeff was restrained from talking about July. Now I didn't know what that conversation was all about. It just sounded cryptic to me, because, like I said, we just got in and they were talking about July, and Elder Jeff was restrained from talking about July. He shouldn't talk about July, and I think one of the reasons was because we don't know all the stories. I think July was it Panium? I think it was either Raffia or Panium, but something about, like I said, we just came in, and we didn't know what was being taught, and it was fuzzy. But all I knew was that Elder Jeff should not mention it, because there was no story, no story behind that. And so, but Elder Jeff, I remember in one of our camp meetings, I think, the Gold Country, I think he mentioned it anyways, because he just couldn't restrain him from mentioning it. But I think one of the problems is that there was no story behind July, and so like you're doing now with the Sunday Law with Elder Terry, there was no story, no connecting thread, like I said, Boston, Concord, and Exeter. And so what you're doing now, connecting the threads, telling a story, and there's different stories, and there's different layers of stories. Even within the same story, there's different layers. So I just really appreciate you taking your time and creating a story, something that we can follow and something that I can understand. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I guess I had a similar thought or feeling when Elder Terry presented her messages for the first time last year, that I missed that story, and I think she disagrees on that. At least I get the feeling that she disagrees on that. But she has been developing a story afterwards. So it in the beginning, it seemed to hang really on Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurgius, like we have a July event, and that's the Sunday law because Maximus Gurgis' Sunday law. We have put this, and that's July, and we have the voting. So that was the first message, and then of course it started to develop. But the first message was without the story. So I think it is good now, and looking at the development of especially this year, that also Elder Terry has a story, and she may say she always had a story that it didn't come across to me like that to me. But I think the story is important. We need to have that story a thread, but also compare and contrast. And I think that's what we've been doing especially in the last 2 months. So I think this exercise that we are going through as a movement now is very important and solidify the Sunday law message. Because if we don't, if we didn't, we basically have the Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurgis study and maybe some additional thoughts, and that's it. And I don't think that was solid enough to have as a Sunday law message. And I think what we're doing right now is making it bulletproof or solid. Yeah, so thank you. So the next is
It's me. It's Mary.
you.
Yes.
Oh,
Hi.
yeah. Hi.
Yeah, thank you very much for your study. I've been following them as well as other presenters. And I noticed that you have a particular focus on the war on the Eastern Front. And I like the fact that you have sort of begun that you have pinned your events from 1989. And from there, we can see different players. We have the King of the North, the King of the South. We have the Islam at the beginning of our waymark. But my question really goes to this dispensation that you mark there in July, is it July 2024? July 20, yeah, exactly there. And also at the end of 2025. And to ask that question, I'm going to ask because you stated that in 2019, the King of the North and the King of the South, King of the North being Trump, the King of the South being Putin, they were in concord there in 2019. They were in alliance, or they were sort of in agreement in 2019. And because of that, so to build it up, Trump was fighting that war on the Western Front. He was trying to become the president of the United States and solicited help from Putin, and they were in alliance at that point in 2019. And we do see that that alliance did not help Trump. He ended up losing the elections. And going back a little bit, in 2001, after the war, leading to the war in Iraq, we see that Bush, the president at that time, invaded Iraq. And you mentioned also how he broke the international law by doing that. He broke the international law. And we see as a result of that, Putin emboldened. And I don't know whether you notice it. Putin invaded Crimea in 2014, but before Crimea, there was Georgia in 2008. So we have Georgia, we have Crimea, and in 2019, he sees his partner or his buddy Trump has lost, so he's got his eye on Ukraine. So holding that thought, and going back to Elder Terry's presentation where he presents that for a power to rise, historically, that power had to win 3 geographical locations. 1, 2, 3, then you win. So with that in mind, we see Putin in 2008 takes Georgia, 2014 he takes Crimea, now he needs Ukraine, and he sees his chance. He's going to seize his chance. But we do see that immediately there with the events taking place here in America between 2019 and 2021, we see the election taking place and Trump loses, Biden rises to power. Trump sees he's going to be defeated and he puts up a fight to take power at all costs, but he loses that. Biden ends up being the president, and he sees the threat that Putin poses to the world now, because he only needs to take Ukraine, and he wins that war on the Eastern Front. So we do see Biden amassing a lot of effort with NATO and all of that, supporting Ukraine. But again, he is in a fix, because if he invades or helps, it is just going to be against the international law. So all he can do is help Zelensky to fight this war on the pretense that, or on the premise that they have been invaded. They have been invaded by Putin. So now moving on to July, I'm not sure the date that you marked there, but you have the month, July 2024. So we do see there Viktor Orban coming to America for that NATO summit, that was Washington summit. It was for NATO. And he senses that Trump is going to come back to power, and he seizes on that. So I'm wondering whether you would mark that as somehow connected to July 18th, because Viktor Orban can see that Biden is losing, or can read the signs, can see the handwriting on the wall, and he aligns with Trump. And as a result of that, or following that trend, we can see now what happened. From there on, it is like the end of Biden ends up losing the debate, and the end is imminent for the war on the Western Front, and Trump comes back to power. And Putin now aligns himself up with Trump. So I'm wondering whether you would put the Sunday law, national Sunday law, around July there. You don't have a date, but you can see the events, that class of events in that month of July. So I'm wondering whether you would put the national, at least the fall of glorious land, and that waymark. At least we can see the signs there. And what you're talking about thereafter is now the relationship or the interaction between Trump and Putin, which is going to end up with Trump being crowned, or somehow Putin acquiescing his plans or his power. And at that particular point, Trump will be the ruler of the world, whereby that will be the worldwide Sunday law. So I'm wondering whether you would be willing to put national Sunday law at July, and from the last dispensation that you have there, February 2025 onward, as the global Sunday law. If I see that, if I follow that, I don't see any contradiction between yours and Elder Terry's.
Wow, thank you for your input. That was it. To be honest, it was a lot for me to follow all the steps, but it sounded like I'm going to listen to this again. So I don't think I'm able to respond to it, but only to your last question. Are you able to have July as the national Sunday law? Yes, of course I am open to change my mind if all my questions are answered. So if we end up with July and all my questions are answered, I'm fine. Your input sounded ready, and that needs, but I'm not able. I don't think if I'm not sure if this is the place to go through this. But I'm going to listen to what you said after recording, I think, to what you said, and maybe that is from food for thought, and consider July. But I'm not sure. I lost some parts of your thread because of what you said, like the three geographical areas, and then they lost connection, etc. So it sounded good, but I'm sorry if I'm not able to respond to it now.
Hey, Arjan.
This is Bob.
Arjan,
Is
this
that
is
okay?
Bob.
Yeah, hi Bob. No, just sorry, but is that okay, Mary?
Yeah, that's okay. I would be happy to hear your input even later.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Bob, yes. Hi.
Hey there. I just, especially listening to what's already been presented, that you presented, and then the other statements of others have made, the way, and help me to make sure that to get the right clarification. But the way I'm understanding it thus far is, and I'll start with your presentation, not Elder Terry's. I look at what you're doing and your storyline, or the theme of your thing is, if I can say, it's limited to the battles between the King of the North and the King of the South. And yes, it backdrops and goes back to seeing what happened in 1989 with the initial fall of the USSR and unilateral, moves and narratives that were made by the United States and everything, going and how that affected things for many, many years, and how it's gone along. But to me, when we think about Sunday law, okay, there's obviously two Sunday laws. There's one that's in the United States first, and then there's going to be a world Sunday law. And I look at the story if I'm understanding you correctly, the story you're trying to present, it has nothing to do with the Sunday law in the United States. It has to do with the war between the King of the North and the King of the South. And obviously, once the King of the South is largely out of the way, and it has no more influence to do stuff, obviously then the United States can flex its muscle. So if anything, your study, I believe, is pointing to the eventual, world Sunday law. But I don't think it has anything to do, if I'm understanding you, it has nothing to do with a national Sunday law in the United States. Whereas what I'm understanding Elder Terry to be presenting has to do with, as you've tried to summarize several times in other presentations you've done, you're summarizing the fact that Elder Terry's talking about how the United States is destroying itself, how the United States is having a war with itself, and so that's what leads to and it is to a Sunday law in the United States. So I see her focusing on that, and obviously that has to be established first. But I see you, both of you, telling different stories. I don't want to say they're completely different, because they're not. There's overlaps, but I see them as different perspectives, and they both need to be appreciated for what they are. And I see the struggle that a lot of us are having is to try to, I don't like using this word, but amalgamate all the stories together. And I don't think that that's the right thing. But can you help a bit more clarity there, please?
Yeah, so I agree, and I think that's what I've said today as well, that Elder Terry is teaching what we call the Western Front, and I'm teaching the same dispensation or the same history, but focusing on the Eastern Front. And these are two different stories that are basically, you could argue, they are disconnected. So the Eastern Front is disconnected from the Western Front. In reality, there's always things tossing and affects certain things, but in the prophetic story, I think the story of the Eastern Front is a different story from Western Front. So the problem is that I think that those waymarks that we have for the Western Front or for the Eastern Front should align with each other. So the Boston in the Eastern Front is 2021. You cannot make the Boston in the Western Front 2020 or 2022. That they should at least align. So I think this is where the problem comes in, where I've been marking 2024 as Exeter. So yes, Eastern Front, Western Front is, I think, the easiest way to make a distinction between our studies. And yes, it has been suggested that what I've been talking about is actually the fall of the King of the South, which is a worldwide Sunday law event. So that's fair enough, and I get that. But it in my mind it doesn't go that quick, in a sense like, oh, you know what, I'll make this a national, I'll make this worldwide Sunday law, and then our problem is solved, because then still, what is national Sunday law? So okay, people may argue about this is a national Sunday law. So let's take another color. So let's say this is national Sunday law. And I think Mary also asked, like, you make this national Sunday law, like, would this be worldwide Sunday law? Yes, okay, but that would then also mean that we still need to have a Boston and an Exeter, or sorry, Concord and Exeter in between. So there must be, if I say 2025 is worldwide Sunday law, then we should have had a how do you say that? A loud cry before that. So I'm not sure then if it destroys a bit of my story. So I'm not 100% sure. I did a study last week in Germany, and we had a conversation there as well. And we tried to select, how would you solve? So what is the problem with you moving your National Sunday Law to 2024? What if you do that, then what would the line look like? And would that be a problem? And if Elder Terry moves her Sunday Law to 2025, what would be the problem? What is her problem for moving it from 2024 to 2025? What's her problem? And if we do that, then what does the line look like? What does the story tell then? So I did that exercise last week, which I think was interesting. And I suppose several did not see that. So if this is the dispensation from 2021 to National Sunday Law, and let's say I'm going to move my position now, and let's say I'm going to move from 2025 to 2024. So if 2024 is National Sunday Law, then we have here, let's say this is September of 2022. So we have October of 2021. Then we have September of 2022 as Concord. And now we have July 2024 as, so that is July to November. So this waymark now that I place as July to November is now Sunday law. Let's change it that way. So then what is then Exeter? Well, Elder Terry has suggested that Exeter is May 30. May 30. I thought it would be I have introduced, or I don't know, I'm not the one introducing it, but I've been emphasizing the characteristic of Exeter, the characteristic of Exeter as being the mini version of the waymark that follows. So you actually can see what is happening, and that means you understand what is going to be the problem in the future. So yeah, last week I said May 30, you can't really see the future because it is a court case between Trump and it's a court case for Trump. It's a hush money court case. So he gets convicted there, and that's her Exeter. And my premise is, well, at Exeter, at least you should see what the Sunday law is going to look like. And that has never been addressed until yesterday. So yesterday, Elder Terry said, like, well, on May 30, and she read an article and she shared a picture where she said, every time Trump needed to go to court, there was always the leadership of the Republican Party was there in court with him to support him. And there was this picture where they stand with their red ties and Trump is sitting there. So they were supportive of him no matter what. So this May 30, it always has been emphasized, it's about this court case. It's actually not about the court case. It's actually about it's actually about the Republicans supporting Trump at May 30. So it is the story internally where she says this is the part of the story. This is where you can see July 18th. So basically, you can see July 18th. So I like that. I've never heard it before. I don't think she presented it before. So she answered my question there, which I thought was neat. On the external line, so May 30 is internal, is Western Front. On the external line, then if I need to have Exeter on my line, the Eastern Front line, then I would go for March. And from the top of my head, I think it was March 8. March 8, 24. And this is where I think that's what I actually read. Didn't I read about it? This is where, what's his name? Orban visits Trump in Mar-a-Lago. And then the day after, he sends out a tweet and says, like, we need you, Mr. President. We need someone in the world that brings peace. So we can see here the King of the North arranging this, tries to settle the conflict. And it starts with this March 8 visit of Orban. And maybe this is also a period from March to July, where actually Orban starts to visit Putin. So if I'm going to change my mind from 2024, from 2025 to 2024, there still needs to be a line that goes from penning to national Sunday law, and it needs to be a story. There need to be waymarks that to thread that story. So just moving from 2025 to 2024 sounds perhaps simple, but isn't, for me at least in my mind, is a little complex, than just moving it. Mm-hmm.
If it is that you're not dealing with the national Sunday law, but rather as I asked, what is your connection, your narrative with Daniel 11:41? So if it is that you're not dealing with, if it is not Daniel 11:41, your narrative would not need to move from where it is. Neither would Terry's narrative need to move from where it is, according to the storyline that she has built. She's saying this is Daniel 11:41, Revelation 13. Why then would she need to move it from where it is to put it into the future to 2025? Or why would you need to move your narrative from where it is? Because it is not the National Sunday Law that you're dealing with a completely different storyline. First point. My second point is the story of the death of Pyrrhus is dealing with Argos. But it is not Rome that killed Pyrrhus. How do you reconcile that point?
Okay. To answer your second question, I actually was still answering Bob's question, but just a short response to your Argos is not the king of the north. True, but Argos, Pyrrhus was killed by Greece, and Greece was also, you could argue that Greece there in that story is, how do you say that? Greece in the bigger picture is the king of the north. So you have the Grecian, so you have the Grecian Empire of Alexander the Great, and then that divides into different parts, and you always have Egypt as being the southern part, and then you have Macedonia and that part where Seleucus becomes the king of the north. That part there, it is where Pyrrhus is killed. So you could argue that the king of the north killed Pyrrhus.
So I'm then.
But and at the same time, you also have if you want to stay in the story of Pyrrhus, you also have Tarentum. So Tarentum is also a symbol for the king of the south. So not looking at Pyrrhus, looking at Tarentum. Tarentum is that city-state that ruled the southern part of Italy. And it's also in 272, the year that we mark as National Sunday Law. It's also, or Sunday Law. It's also in the same year where Pyrrhus was killed. It's also where Tarentum falls, and Rome takes control of the whole Italy. So if Pyrrhus isn't killed by the king of the north, then at least you see Tarentum fall by the king of the north. So Rome takes Tarentum in the same year. So there you can still, and that also has to do with spheres of influence, that Tarentum story. So you can see that.
And that's what I'm saying. We are speaking about narrative, right? And if you're saying this is the story of Tarentum, or is it the story of Argos? Because if it is the story of Argos, then the symbols would need to be refined, to be defined in a way that the narrative can be clear. Just as how you just brought out, Tarentum fell 272, Rome took control of Tarentum. Have no problem with that. But if it is that you're saying, oh, the Battle of remember when we are dealing with it, we never said Tarentum fell 272. Well, for me, I didn't hear that narrative being brought out. I hear the Battle of Argos. So that's why I'm saying, how would you then say this is the story of Argos? Because it is not the king of the north as it relates to the seventh kingdom, Rome, that takes Argos. Nice point that you made out. Yes, Greece is the king of the north. So I'm just saying clarity therefore needs to be had in what storyline it is that you're telling, just the same. And I'm also arguing that when we are telling our different stories and it is being developed, a point may not be brought out clearly because our focus is just on one thing. But as you have said as well, as the narrative is being repeated and repeated, then it gets built and becomes more solid. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so.
So more clarity is given as we go along. It doesn't negate your story. It is just repeating and enlarging and bringing your story more clearly to light. Because as when 2014, I'm sure you were there. There is none of us who had a clear understanding of 2014 until 2018 when Elder Tess came along and started showing us how 2014 was the Sunday law. We were in darkness 2015, 16. We just said Sunday law, there's a Sunday law 2014, but there was no one that was fleshing out that narrative, no one. And that narrative was given by Elder Parminda, and he never clarified it. He never fleshed it out. So for me, having been through that history, having accepted a Sunday law at 2014 without being given a clear narrative, I don't see why I should be so hung up or stuck on July saying, oh, the narrative was not built, when there was no narrative that was correctly or clearly built in 2014 that any of us can point to. And we all accepted it and we're okay.
Yeah, I understand that too, and I dealt with that also earlier. That I in the past we have been looking back and correcting waymarks that we hadn't seen before. So it's always in hindsight that you understand things better. And I'm not arguing that that is necessarily wrong. But since Elder Tess has been in the movement, we've always been in step with the waymarks. At least she has been. As soon as she came in 2018 and she started to bring the Midnight Cry, she talked about Heraclea. She explained what it was in December of 2018. December of 2018, she explained that Heraclea was 2018, and she addressed the certain events that failed it. So in December of 2018, she recognized that waymark. And then we moved on. And in December of 2019, she said, and this is Raphia, and these events are Raphia. So she was instead every time we passed the events, we passed the waymark, Elder Tess was there to explain them. So we were always in step with the waymark since the Midnight Cry. Before, no, I agree. So 2014 and even Elder Tess has been giving us the structure of, I think it's only Elder Tess that started to develop the increase of knowledge in 2009 and the formalization in 2012. That hasn't been set, that only settled with Elder Tess in 2018, 2019 time period. So yes, that was all fixed afterwards. But as we were in the time, we were always in step with the waymarks. And then suddenly Elder Tess was not there to present anymore for us. She left in 2020 after the Vesper series. In 2022. And suddenly we lost our track. Because were we in increase of knowledge? Were we not? Were we still in Panium? I think this whole movement was confused even about Panium. Even Elder Tess, she started explaining Panium, but I think she kind of left that she didn't answer, wasn't able to deal with. And so I think this movement until recently never really settled on what actually 2021 is, Western Front or Eastern Front. So I think this study kind of solidifies 2021 in regard to Penny and what it is, where the emphasis is. And I think even Elder Tess already emphasized October. So I don't really say anything new. I think I maybe solidify it and make it perhaps a little bit more clear. But the internal issues, the Western Front in regards to 2021 have been, to my understanding, have been untouched. Of course, we say, oh, it's January 6th. January 6th was significant, and it was, but there are so many things happening in 2021. And I don't think we have ever made it a story from 2021 with all the events taking place. What are the important events in 2021? And make a story out of it that leads you to the Sunday law. So where's the agitation? Where's then Boston? Where's Boston? Where's Concord? Where's Exeter that brings you to the Sunday law? We haven't done that in this time period after Tess leaves us. And then suddenly there was this Sunday law message of Elder Terry where she said, in 3 weeks we have a Sunday law. And then I was like, hey, wait a minute. I don't think we even understand Penium. I don't think we even understand what Concord or Exeter is. So why don't we suddenly understand the Sunday law? That was my premise. Like, hey, shouldn't we be in step with the waymarks? as Elder Tess was, and that Elder Tess left us now doesn't mean that we are free now to just do nothing and just fix everything with hindsight. No, actually, we should have learned from that process with Elder Tess. We should be in step with our waymarks. That was my premise, and the critique that I had to what Elder Terry presented. Like, hey, shouldn't we focus first on the waymarks before? Then sure, we will be able to understand the waymark Sunday law. So yes, I agree that we fixed waymarks in the past, but I think that was, but I think since the Midnight Cry, we should not do that. I think we should be able to now be in step with our waymarks, and the waymark passes, we should be able to see it and present it and teach it. And of course, with hindsight, you can fine-tune things and see a thread, see a story that you haven't been seeing when you were in the waymark. Of course, there's always, with hindsight, we can make it, we can a better story, but we should be able to, I think, see the waymarks as they pass. And I've been saying that before, is that this study has been developed starting in 2022 to until today. So this waymark of 2022, the characteristics of that waymark were established at the end of 2022. These were the things that I personally was studying, and I presented it locally in my group or with a friend. But it has never been publicly presented, recorded, published, things like that. So, and then also the 2024 Exeter was for the first time presented. This is when I did my study in January. It was in January 2025 where I said, like, hey, I think this is Exeter. And then I also presented this as being Concord. So that has been part of my argument to support this line. So like, hey, this has been at least been developed while being in step with the waymarks and not fixing things looking back.
I think Kathy had her hand up a while back and then fell.
Okay, Kathy.
And I think I've forgotten my question because I've been listening to everyone. I guess I just kind of wondered, and I'm sorry if I can't remember from your Germany. So Elder Tess would take, like when she did World War One, she had like the Third Diadochi War with World War One and World War Three. Are you using those models in yours? Things like the different things that she does with these, like Pyrrhus with Macedonia and Pyrrhus in Italy and Russia, World War II. Are those factored in? Because I don't have enough to know. Sorry.
And just real quick, not to forget Victoria as well. Sorry for question. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, because I think World War One, Third Diadochi. So Third Diadochi War lines up with World War One, and then the Fourth Diadochi War lines up with World War Two, and I think those 4 lines show you, for example, the death of the King of the South at the Sunday Law.
Yes, so, I agree. I see that. Yeah.
So that is one of the arguments that you could use. Like, the King of the South dies at the Sunday Law. So now we have the arguments like, what Sunday Law? Is it the national or is it the worldwide Sunday Law? But that was one of the lines that was the series of lines that I would go to. Is like, hey, Sunday Law is death of the King of the South, and that was one of the premise. That was one of the proofs that I would use. Like, okay, we have Penium, Sunday Law. So here we mark a death of the King of the South. Well, okay, that has been adjusted, fine-tuned, correct. It's like, okay, that's worldwide Sunday Law. But those are the 4 lines, or one of them, to go to say King of the South dies there.
So essentially, your line is showing King of the North on the Eastern Front, which is interesting too, because Ukraine is a proxy of the King of the North, which it's in there. And then, so like you've repeated before, that Elder Terry is showing the internal Western Front.
Mhm.
So now we have to figure out how to make this work then.
Yeah, that's the challenge we're in at the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Okay. Well, I'm glad we're in this challenge together.
yeah, oh yeah, definitely. And I think this is really valuable that we go through this, and as a movement, I think we learn from it, develop it, and the message will shine in the
Mhm.
end. And to select just one thing to emphasize, or one thing to, when we go to the line of Pyrrhus in Italy, we say like, okay, that ends with Argos, for example. But that's only one characteristic of that waymark, because Elder Tess, when she presented that way back at the beginning in 2018, she marked Argos, but she also marked the death of Tarentum, for example. So it's not something
Mhm.
that afterwards has developed. It's something that was brought up by Elder Tess. But one thing that I thought was interesting, this line of Italy, it starts with Ukraine. So this line of Italy, sorry, Pyrrhus in Italy, it's in 1980, marks 1989. And this is the story when this city-state, this great city-state in the southern Italy, it's this city-state called Thurii that is in the spheres of influence of another city-state called Tarentum. So Tarentum is the main city-state in that area, who has in its spheres of influence in the region. Thurii is another city-state, and now it has problems, and it asks help from Rome. So Rome is in the north, and Tarentum isn't happy with that, and therefore it attacks Thurii and wants to get rid of the Roman. I think there was a Roman department now or something. They want to get rid of it because they wanted to be in control of Thurii. So this story of Italy, Pyrrhus in Italy, starts in 1989 with Thurii appealing to Rome. So in application, that is Ukraine appeals to Europe or to the West. So that happens in 1989. So you see Ukraine here. Ukraine appeals to the West after the falling apart of the USSR. Ukraine appeals to the West, becomes part of, obviously, of Europe. They become an independent state, and they appeal to the West. Then in 2014, when Ukraine even wants to appeal more to the West, Russia is not happy. Putin is not happy and invades it. So 2014 is
Crimea.
Russia invades Crimea. So that is Tarentum attacking Thurii after Thurii appealed to Rome. So
Okay.
in that story, those two waymarks, there's no Pyrrhus at all. So Pyrrhus only arrives here in 2016. Here in 2016, it's Pyrrhus that takes control of Tarentum. So Tarentum here in this waymark, Tarentum is the king of the south, and Tarentum is the one taking Crimea, so to speak. So the king of the south is also, you can also mark Tarentum here as the king of the south, and it's then Pyrrhus that comes and helps Tarentum, and then Pyrrhus becomes, because you have this king and kingdom connection, then
Right.
Pyrrhus also becomes the king of the south. And then here at the end, we have Pyrrhus being killed in Argos, but we also have Tarentum being taken by Rome, and Rome takes control of the whole of Italy. So this, and especially this falling of Tarentum and Rome taking control of Italy. That's a story about spheres of influence. And the killing of the killing of Pyrrhus in Argos maybe emphasizes another point about the king of the south, the death of the king of the south, maybe not related to spheres of influence, but something else. But that's something that I don't have the answer to. I just want to just show that there is several characteristics that deal with a death of the king of the south, and maybe every characteristic tells you a different part or a different story of that death.
So my final question,
Yep.
so Exeter is time, and are you predicting 2025 as the National Sunday Law specifically, based on the peace treaty between Ukraine and Russia?
Yeah, so that's what I was suggesting, that
Yeah.
I think the events that played out here predicted that as soon as Trump is going to be in office, he's going to fix this. These were his own words. I just took him by his own words, basically. So like, as soon as I'm in office in January, we're going to fix this in a day. So okay, it takes a little longer, and maybe it takes a little longer even that we expected it. I don't know, but yeah. So that was the premise, that this predicts 2025. Yeah.
Well, Trump is also very determined to win the Nobel Peace Prize at some point.
Did
So
he say
he's,
that?
yeah, he's highly motivated. He's a man of peace. So it would be interesting to see how much the King of the South plays with this role, you know, letting Trump have this role. Even though we know he's lost, the King of the South has lost a lot of spheres of influence and issues like that. But so anyway, well, thank you, Arjan. I appreciate it.
Yep.
A lot to keep in my mind. It's so complex.
Oh yeah, it is.
But I'm working on
We'll
it.
get there. We'll get there.
Thank you.
Yep. So who was next? Was it
Hi.
Victoria? Hi.
Hi, Aaron.
I think Fel had his hand up. I lost track, but I think it was Fel, and I know Emmanuel's trying to speak now, so
Yeah.
I'll let them sort it out.
Well, I thought Victoria was before me, but Victoria, you have your question?
I'll go last.
Okay. So, you know, paraphrasing Elder Parminder. Now, this is more of an observation than a question. So, paraphrasing Elder Parminder, he said something like that: we're too hung up on conclusion rather than enjoying the journey. And we should take this journey and enjoy it. And so what I see you doing is you're developing a story, and you're taking us through a journey according to what you think is correct. And I think like Aaron, that you're honest enough, open-minded enough, humble enough, as you take yourself and us through this journey, that if you don't think it's going the way you think it's going, like I said, I think you're humble enough to change it. And you know, as you're willing to see how you can connect it with Elder Terry, if that's even possible, and it may or it may not be. But I just appreciate your, like I said, your honesty, your open-mindedness, and your humility. So thank you.
So that was that.
Yeah, I thought I heard Emmanuel. Here he goes.
Hi, Aaron.
Hi.
Thank you so much for the review. As you said, that this is just a review of what you have already presented. And I'm really happy that we have to see you in person, not in person, like online, in real time live. And thank you for coming to have this study with us. And my question is that I really appreciate your studies based on the Eastern Front. while Elateri, she's focusing on the Western Front. And it seemed like you two are running these two stories parallel, of which we have been talking about the whole time in the movement, like King of the South, King of the North. And also it comes to the point that who is the main character in this story, of which we all know that is the King of the North, uh, not King of the South. And King of the South is just in the way of the King of the North to achieve. It's the one, as you said before, it is restraining the King of the North from achieving its goal of world dominance. As Alexander said, King of the North, King of the North, as the Seventh Kingdom, started in 1989. So, as you have, and the prediction of Sunday Law, as we know, originally from Ellen G. White, is based on the King of the North. So, and that's what Elateri is also basing on. I studied on it for the National Sunday Law as I story of Western Front. So, and your story is for the Eastern Front, which is the King of the South, or which it has something to do with Sunday Law, but it's not like a prediction of Sunday Law. If you're going to talk like who's dictating the story here, is it the King of the North or King of the South?
So the one who is the one that is dictating in this time period is the King of the North.
Yeah, who is dictating the Sunday Law, the story of Sunday Law? Is it the King of the South or King of the North?
Sunday Law is a Western Front issue, so that is dealing with King of the North internally. So when we talk about Sunday Law, National Sunday Law, it's talking about national, and that means United States. So that means King of the North. And yes, at the same time, we know that at that waymark, we also have an Eastern Front line, and at that line, we also have an interaction with the King of the South. So they're both there. But when you talk about Sunday Law, National Sunday Law, it's internal USA.
Oh, thank you. That's what I want to know. Because, like, I'm seeing your point is that like as long as King of the South is part of the story, that means they have to be in the same line. I see that's why you're trying to harmonize the two to be in the same line. Of which, if the Sunday Law is being based on the story of the Western Front, that means also, and King of the South is in the way, they have to be in the same line and the same studies as one, of which for Elateri, National Standard Law is like 2014 in July, no, 2024 in July, and yours is like, as you suggest to be like February this year, or maybe further more in March or April, something like that, based on the agreement. So trying to harmonize this kind of studies is really good. Because like we can understand both sides of the King of the North and King of the South. And when will the King of the South really die, like in real sense? I see that. I see that.
Nice. So that was Victoria?
Gloria has her hand up, and then I'll go after Gloria.
Oh, Gloria. Oh,
Do you
Gloria.
want to go first, Victoria? I don't mind waiting. Go
Oh,
ahead.
go-
You've been waiting for so long. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna go last, so go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Arjan. Aryan, I do learn a lot from vast history that you're presenting. But I would have to agree with what Mary said. I appreciate the significant dates that you put right at July, where we're you know, emphasizing July 18 as being the Sunday Law waymark. Now, because our test is equality, and Mark of the Beast is Manosphere, and the event that happened there in July 18 also, you know, war is about abuse of human rights, right? And so we could also apply that too in this King of the North and King of the South war. And I think Elder Parminder put the video with Fiona Hill in media broadcast, and she declared Ukraine war being the World War III. And interestingly, it takes 3 wars, World War I, World War II, World War III, for the papacy to rise. I mean, they're hidden, but for the Seventh Kingdom to, rise to the top, or we could call it the Sunday Law movement, So I just want to emphasize that the events that you mentioned in July with Orban, coming to USA, giving homage to Trump and not Biden or to the Democratic Party, but to the Republican Party, is a significant point there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I have 3 questions. So is that line that you have starting with February and then October and then on down to 2025, is that line a fractal or a big line?
It's a dispensation of a fractal.
Which fractal or which history or what?
It's from Panium to the Sunday Law, and it's specifically on the line of the Levites and the Nethinims.
So it's on, okay, for both the Levites and the Nethinims? Okay, because I'm just trying to, because I'm trying to see if this is from, because we have to look at the big line and then we look at the fractals, because the fractals are just zooming in on the big line. So we don't use the fractals to, depict the big story, because
Yes.
that would lead us to make mistakes. It's the big line that is to direct us. So I'm just trying to understand the line. I mean, to have it in my mind to understand where you're placing us on the big line, like what that looks like. Because what that line looks like to me is a fractal, but I'm just trying to see it better.
Yeah,
So
good point. So this is a dispensation of a fractal line. So the fractal line is bigger. It starts in depends on what line you take. Let's go first to the line of the 144,000. It starts in 1989. I don't have much space here. So this is Sunday Law, close of probation, and the second advent. So here, those 2 waymarks here, it's Raphia and Panium. And then if we go to a fractal, and I don't have the space to do that now, but so this is the 144,000 line. Then we have the priest that goes until here, I think, or here.
Goes to Panium.
Goes to Panium. Okay, so something like that. No, that's not correct to draw. But anyway, so like that. I don't have much space. So and then you have the line of the Levites, and then you have the line of the Nethinims. Something like that. So we are dealing with this history here. So on the line of the 144,000, there's no waymarks between. There's already 2 waymarks here. So there's 2 smaller waymarks. So there's nothing in between here. But here, so these are the 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 waymarks. The main one, the big one. And in between the main and the big one, we have those 2 smaller waymarks, right? It gets a little small. But so this is what we're talking about. So this last dispensation of the Levites, for example, is the one where we're talking about. But if you go to the big picture, of the 144,000, that's the original line, then we're talking about the history that precedes the Sunday law. So then if you zoom out and you go to 9/11 and Sunday law, and that's what I actually did here. So I went through the bigger line to put us in a position to be able to understand this little dispensation on the fractal line. So 2021, this one here, that's what I said here, is an Exeter. It's a smaller waymark. It's here. It's a small waymark before the Sunday law. So 2021 is an Exeter. And I'm suggesting in 2021, you can already see a little bit of what we're going to see at the Sunday law in a bigger scale. And that was the throne. It was Joe Biden taking control of the situation and saying, okay, we're going to defeat the King of the South now. We're going to win the narrative. We're going to share information. We're going to counter-attack with information. We're going to take the position to solve this issue. So that is the United States taking back the throne, going to this unilateral power, and that's what we mark. We see in a small. We see that in this October meeting, so to speak, in the White House, this meeting, the decision that is made, and in small you can see what the Sunday law is going to look like in big when the United States takes control of the whole world. But it started here. So therefore, on the big picture, I think this study still holds. And I think that's what I tried to do at the beginning, to go to this big picture, to see the context of the dispensation we're discussing, and also to see the connection of 2021 and the future Sunday laws waymarks. I don't know if that helps, but
a little. My second question is, so you're looking at the Boston, Concord, Exeter, and we know that's part of the full pattern is Boston, Concord, Exeter test. So the test would be at that February, where you have 2025. And I'm wondering, what is that symbolizing? Like, so it's Boston, Concord, Exeter test. And I'm just wondering, what does that symbolize for you, or what is that looking like?
before going there, I think we have said Boston, Concord, Exeter test, but I think Elder Test has adjusted a little bit by saying that actually at Exeter we have the test. So it is actually Boston, Concord
Right.
test, and then at the bigger waymark we only see the end result, so to speak. So this is the litmus test, or there you can see the two groups being developed at the bigger waymark. So the test is actually at Exeter. So yeah, so I don't know if there is a test on this King of the North, King of the South a battle or fight, but that is, I think, the structure that we've set. So on the Western Front, if 2024 is in Exeter, you can see in July, for, let's say, the people in the United States, they fully can see now what is going on. So you have Donald Trump being the head of the Republican Party. The Republican Party is cleansed, and there is this demonstration of manosphere. There is this. They present their program, so to speak. So at the RNC and also at the DNC, both the parties, they present their position on the issues, on immigration or on money, on education or whatever. So you have, it's all set. It's demonstrated. It's formalized. So this is where now the test is: where do you stand, so to speak, and then it's only demonstrated in 2025. Who is going to what is going to happen
Okay.
with the administration?
All right. Well, that clears up my thank you.
Okay.
So, Arjan, your story doesn't have the image of the beast or the mark of the beast in it.
No, it's Western Front.
Okay.
But people ask me, or Elder Terry even asked me, if I say this is Sunday law, then she said, "What do you think the image of the beast or the mark of the beast is?" Um, it's not part of this study, and people ask me, of course, and I don't want to go in. Yeah, I think I see everything what Elder Terry presents as being what you see at July 18. I think you can see there the image of the beast is set up. You can see it. It's openly there. It is yeah, it's a full demonstration of the image, and even the mark of the beast. You can see its characteristic. You can see everything. It's fully there. So I think that I could be wrong, but I think that is what Elder Terry has been marking as the image and the mark of the beast being fully demonstrated in July. And I agree with that. But I only make this distinction between an Exeter and a Sunday law. It's like, yes, you can now, that is for me, that is a how do you say that? That is the perfect fulfillment of an Exeter. In July, you can see it complete, you can see it. It's there, it's open, it is formalized, everybody can see it. It's only not there, it doesn't have power yet. We're going to see that happen the next waymark. So it's therefore it's that prediction also. That is how I visualize this. So what Elder Terry says that this is the solid, you cannot see it and it's there and it's established. I say yes, and because of that, I would say that's the perfect Exeter. So I guess we'll solve this, and I'll probably the one backs down and say like, okay, we'll go for July. But the same argument that Elder Terry uses to say like this is Sunday law, I say like, yeah, I use the same argument, and therefore it's Exeter. So I don't know.
I just have one. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
So with because you're focusing on the King of the North, King of the South, but where you when I think back to Curtis' study and he I know it's a different perspective, but he was talking about the narrative of a waymark. So when he does 2024 and he's doing the bookend to say with July being the start of the bookend and then the ending waymark being December, but you have November. And so I'm just wondering because what you're telling there, that narrative, what I'm just trying to see how that aligns with Curtis study, because when he reviewed his presentation in the UK, and it was brought up there again about the book ending, and he because at first when he was with us he said July as the opening of the bookend, and then the closing being November, but no, I think he always said December. I think I'm wondering if he said November at first, but then he was like, and he wasn't set on whether no, he was like November/December. But then when he went to the UK and the question was brought up again, he was like cemented on the thought of the closing bookend being December. I'm just wondering your thoughts about that because that is when you're looking at that single waymark, that's what I'm seeing with you having 2024 there. And then, I mean, it's the same, even though your focus is on the King of the South and King of the North, I'm just in my mind that, like, from as the Sunday Law message has been developing from all the speakers that have presented, December seems to be the closing bookend for that waymark, if that makes sense. So it's not necessary. I guess my question is, where is your stance with that development?
So, yes, I remember I remember Curtis say July to December, and I think his logic is that July is actually not really an election. It's actually within the Republican Party, kind of like an electoral college. So you have the primaries all the way from, I think it's from January to, was it April, May? You have the primaries, and this is where the election actually takes place. This is where people pick their candidate. And then the electoral college is basically it's the representatives of the different states. It's kind of like a mini electoral college. So he said, like, July is not an election, it's the electoral college of an election that took place in the primaries. So if you started in July with an electoral college vote at the RNC, then it also should be bookended with an electoral college in December. So he marks December 17 or December 18 as where the electoral college of the actual election took place. So I think that's his logic. And I don't have a problem with, but he marks it as Sunday law. So we are out of sync one way mark. So he marks it as National Sunday Law. I'm having it as Exeter. This July to November, I've never made it. How do you say that? Said it before. They're not so. There's a way to say it, but I'm not so dogmatic about it. I guess I say I'm not so dogmatic about the July to November. When I came, because as I said, there's this Orban-Trump meeting in March. I ignored it now in this because I could state this and begin this in March, and also in December there is an interaction with Trump and Orban, and I'm not 100% sure, but perhaps even with Putin. No, I don't think with Putin, but at least Trump and Orban. So I could have done March and December also, but I purposely did July to November back then because I think they are the most need, because Putin is involved, Putin is here, Putin is there, but also because back in the day, back in January, not anymore, but back in January when I presented this for the first time and I nailed as July, November, we had two messages that were around, two Sunday law messages. You had a Sunday law message saying July was the Sunday law, and the other said November is the Sunday law. And by saying July to November here was for me also saying to other messages, so to speak, like, I'm fine with the concepts that you present. I'm only placing it one way mark back. So that was my indirect message to say, I'm fine with July. I'm fine with July 18 being a significant event, watching the Republican Party develop through the years, coming to this point and say, like, this is the thing that is entering the glorious land, so to speak. So I agree with that, and I see it. And these months placing at this waymark was for me also indirectly saying I agree with that. I only I'm only out of sync, so to speak, one way mark. So I'm not so dogmatic about it. This could be December or March, but I think July to November in this case fits best.
Thank you.
Just as, for example, in this way, Mark, I say February to September, but for example, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, Dobbs v. Jackson, is in June. It's not February, it's not September, it's this June period. So that's all fine. It's in the same year, it's in the same time period. I think that works fine.
So I know we got to close here pretty quick, but I just want to add one more question into all of this. When you go back to Elder Tess's studies, and that the King of the South would have a deadly wound, death, and resurrection. That was 1989-91. That she lined up that deadly wound and that death as Panium for Russia as Panium and Sunday Law. So if the death of Russia is aligned with Sunday Law, should it not at least still be in the same year? I guess what I'm asking is, what you lay out would suggest Sunday Law is not until 2025. And what she lays out, to me, if I understand correctly, what she lays out using July 18 would be according to the big line, and then therefore there's no need for Boston, Concord, and Exeter on the big line. So wouldn't, though, the King of the South death have to be, and Elder Tess said it was spheres of influence, and we can look at what happened in the Middle East, wouldn't the death of the King of the South have to be more in line with the Sunday Law? The Sunday Law would have its actual date. Every waymark had its own story that would give you time. So it would have its own date, but you would have many prophetic events that take place in the course of that year. Hope that made sense.
What's the question?
Because if I follow what you have, Panium to Sunday Law, then Sunday Law would have to be there in 2025, based on what you have there. So, and you're saying that's the death of the King of the South. Is that right? The death of the King of the South?
Well, yes and no. There must be some event connected with the downfall of the King of the South in regard King of the South, King of the North. But the final end of Russia we mark at the worldwide Sunday Law. So this is National Sunday Law, and I'm also suggesting that we must see some external an event in relation to the King of the North and the King of the South, where the King of the South is maybe not its final death blow, but at least in some shape or form, or the beginning of the death. That's what I've said before in another presentation, that if this is the death of the King of the South, then this is at least the beginning of the death, and this is the end of the death of the King of the South externally.
But how does that coincide with what Elder Tess said, where the deadly wound or the beginning would be Panium, and National Sunday Law would be the end or the death?
Yes, that is Elder Tess did this. This is the deadly wound, and this is the death. And I think since Fiji, Elder Terius suggested that it's actually here where, so I don't think she moved this away, that she said like wound and death is incorrect here, but I think she has been saying we have a wound and a death here also. This is externally, and she says wound and death here is internally for the King of the South.
Thank you.
I have another question. Are the politics in Europe, are they becoming more far right? Do you think it'll follow the US as Trumpism? Do you think all the countries there in Europe will embrace Trumpism? Are we seeing that at the Worldwide Sunday Law?
Yeah, I think in Europe we see more and more the politics going more to the right. But at the same time, I don't think that is even necessary, because at the end of the world, we see the USA taking this unilateral power. This becomes the police of the world. It's going to take control of the other nations, and it's just forcing the other nations to be in line with them. So what you see with Russia and with Ukraine, like what you see with Trump, with Zelensky in the Oval Office, and um, and and then have a phone call afterwards, and then suddenly everything is okay again. So this threatening basically of Zelensky, of Ukraine, and also I guess similarly with Putin, is Trump is not, you cannot joke with Trump. He is destroying you, and he's just forcing you to listen to what they want, that what he wants. And if you don't listen, you will get a tariff of 50%, or you will be sanctioned or whatever. So you will be punished. So if you don't listen to what he says, you will be punished. So in the end, people don't want to be punished. People don't want to have tariffs. People don't want to have sanctions. So in the end, they decide, okay, we'll go with Trumpism. So even if you're a left-leaning country, in the end, you will have to listen to Trump and be. So yes, politics in Europe goes quite uh, uh, leans more to the right the last years. Also here in the Netherlands. But I don't think that is even necessary to be a puppet of Trump in the end. You can be a far left nation, but if you don't listen to Trump, you will be punished with tariffs of 50% and sanctions, and you won't be able to operate. So you'll listen in the end anyway. That's my
Okay, thank you. And how do you see the dynamics between Trump and Putin right now? Because they seem in a friendly terms, right? And it looks like Trump won't let Russia fall. How do you see that?
Well, Trump is, I think, more scared with China, and therefore I think he tries to win Russia away from China. So Russia has been having friendly relationships with China, and I think Trump wants to redirect Russia away from China into the spheres of influence of the United States, and I think that's going to be successful in the end of the day. That also Russia is going to sit in the spheres of influence of the United States. Yeah, that's in the end. What I see is everybody speaks about, oh, Putin is the big winner of this whole controversy. Putin is the loser. He already lost here, and you could see it here. He cannot do anything. The King of the North needs to help him. Trump is the one who dictates everything at the moment, and of course he's being friendly, but that's only because he wants Russia to be in its spheres of influence. He doesn't want to be Russia being in the spheres of influence of China, so to speak, or that Russia and China become stronger allies. He wants to redirect Russia away from China to his own spheres of influence. That's what Trump is doing. That's the death of the King of the South, being in the spheres of influence.
Death of the King of the South is they're losing the spheres of influence, and they're economically and militarily weakened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. Especially the spheres of influence, I think, is the primary part. Militarily weakened, I'm not sure, because I'm not sure if that is a characteristic. You know, they have bunkers full of atomic bombs. I don't know. I always say I don't believe the world will end with all those bombs still in the bunkers. There comes a time they will be used, I guess. Satan is not going to end this war with all that material stored somewhere. So
Arjan, quick, from the pattern that you have Boston, Concord, etc. there, where would you put the image of the beast?
I think I'm going to agree with Elder Terry that it's in July,
Okay.
but that's in Exeter. And maybe that the image will speak only. I don't know if that's. I'm not I'm not an expert on the image and mark of the beast story,
Would
but I
that the
know
image of the beast be the manosphere?
I think it's part manosphere is part of that story. Yes, the characteristic. What is we have seen it in July, and I think manosphere is part of that story, a big part of that story. We've seen it here in July, but you see it also in January. And I think Elder Terry said you can see it in January even on steroids. So it's when you have January 20 here, you see Hulk Hogan ripping off his T-shirt. Here in January 20, you see all the big guys, the tech guys in their suits and ties walking around in the Capitol.
I agree, Aryan. And I was also thinking that Trump kind of spoke as a dragon because that's when he said there's only two genders in the United States.
Yeah, so now they are speaking as the dragon there. Now they are able to do something. They have the power. So you can
Yes,
see it. The image is fully set up here at Exeter,
I
and now
agree.
it's going to operate there.
That's
That
how
has
I'm
been my
thinking
logic.
about it.
That's
Sorry. That's the way you explain it is how I still see it. I'm willing to change, but I don't
yeah.
see the
So
Sunday law as being the Republican National Convention. That was the setting up of the image. I see the image in place, but I don't see the image and the Sunday law are still two distinct things, right? The image is not the Sunday law. And the great test of the people of God is to see the image. And we can see it in place on July 18th, as Elder Terry says. But I still think the people have to choose that form of government because it still wasn't the government in authority on July 20th. I'm willing to bend, but that's just what I see.
yeah, I'm not sure if this may sound strange, but I'm not sure if the voting of the people here, because we've in the beginning, I think like at the end of 2024, there was this discussion, and I think Aaron's had it part of his message that the voting is very important in this.
Yes, but that's
That the
not the
people
mark of the
make it.
beast.
No, I don't think that is
No,
important in this story. I think this story is about the Republican Party
yes.
and doing its thing. And I think the voting is not it's not the important part of that story. Also,
But
the November voting, not. I think.
doesn't the image need a government? So in a way, I didn't think that the voting may cause the mark of the beast, but the people chose that form of government. They chose a king. That's how I saw it. I still didn't
Yeah.
see it as the mark. I see it as a
The
beast.
mark of the beast you can see. So the mark of the beast, what is the mark? What does that mean? The mark of the beast is the characteristic of the beast. What is the characteristic of the beast? I think that is, how do you translate mark of the beast? I think that is the characteristic. How do you characterize the beast today? And where do you see that character? And I think you can see that in July. I think manosphere is perhaps one of the characteristics. You could say that's the mark of the beast. It was fully shown here at July. Um,
Yes.
um, so you have the mark of the beast there, so you can see it now. And when you see it here, you know how it's going to operate there. And so that has been my logic of when you see it here, you know how it's going to work there. That's the steps that I made in my logic. But like I said, we may end up having this being the Sunday law. Um, but I think I still need to have some clicks in my mind to get that. But we'll see where we get.
Just a
Well,
quick question. Oh,
Go ahead.
For each of the internal way or the waymarks that you have, what would you mark as the internal events? Because right now you have the external.
So for those 4 waymarks, the internal events.
Yes.
Good point. What did let me think. I think I put that last week in the German meeting. So 2021. Okay, so yeah. So 2021, you have January 6th. This is where Trump tries to steal the election, basically. This insurrection, January 6th, he tries to do it according outside of the law. So to break the law and just have this coup. It fails. He is impeached in January 13th, I think. And then January 20th, Joe Biden is installed and the democracy still stands, so to speak. The system still works. So now the question is, and I think that was the question in the 2021, is what is Trump going to do? And even the Republican Party tried to think like, are we done with Trump now, or are we actually still continue to work with him? And I think there was this time period where maybe Ron DeSantis felt like, maybe I'm going to be the next Trump, and I'm going to be the new president. So there was this controversy, or not controversy, this time period where there was a little uncertain. What is Trump going to do? So I'm saying that's in the invisibility. You can't really see it yet. And then in 2022, I think it's November 15th, if I'm correct, from the top of my mind, I think it is where Trump announces his candidacy. So now you can see Trump is going to run for president. He's going to be a candidate for the Republican Party, but he is several out of many. He's one out of many. So there is this, how do you say that? Primaries, where I think there are several candidates. And then so you have the primaries, he is announcing his candidacy, and then here in July, he wins the primaries, and he's the only candidate of the Republican Party. So he's now the sole ruler, so to speak, of the Republican Party. The Republican Party is cleansed. You can see its manosphere. It's fully in display. You have the documents there where it says like, we stand for this, 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 and this, and this. And November is going to be the voting. But here you can see it. In July, there's this full display. Donald Trump is the sole candidate. And now he is going to rule here. So that will be the story that would fit for me. I think that's the one that I presented last week as well, shortly when somebody asked. Does that make sense, or do you have a comment on it?
Yes, I see how you explained that. And also I was asking more like internally, like radical feminism 2021, 2022, do you still mark Vespers? Do you agree with that as well?
Oh, internal in the movement.
Yeah, but
yes. So radical feminism, I think, was presented here. That was October. Yes, Vespers series. So this is Vespers. That was definitely the increase of knowledge to the Sunday law. And then I would say Elder Terry's message here is a perfect Exeter. It's the perfect Exeter experience within our movement. And then we are here settling into the Sunday law in 2025.
okay, thank you.
I have a quick question. So, like, if the story of the National Sunday Law is about Kingdom of the North, which is like the Western Front, then what line do you base your Sunday Law of 2025 February? Because Elder Terry based her line on the Kingdom of the North in 63 BC, I think, when Rome entered into the glorious line. So, and she used that line to make a prediction of Sunday Law in our time. So, what line are you basing your prediction of Sunday Law in 2025 February?
Well, the February is just a matter of seeing the events taking place today. That is 2025 is, I think, also based on Exeter. Exeter is always the one that predicts it. So Exeter says, I look at this waymark and say like, okay, I can see what is happening here. That's why I understand this waymark. And even in this time period, we know in 2024, we know that, okay, if Donald Trump is in office, and we knew in November that he would be in office, and he said, when I'm in office, I'm going to fix this in one day. So that's a time prediction. You can say like, okay, that means this fixing is 2025. So that has been my logic to point to 2025. And I can give you another controversial one, which is, I don't think it's correct, but I like it, is 2021 is an Exeter to the Sunday Law. So Exeter is also time, right? And in the study of X27, where they were in the storm and the ship is broken, almost broken, and they ran into an island, and they crash on. They are about to crash on the rocks, but before they crash on the rocks, they start to measure the depth. So they start to measure the depth. I think it's 15 fathoms, and then they measure again. It's 20 fathoms, and so they are measuring how close are they to shipwreck. That's what they are measuring, and the answer is 2520. Remember that is 15 fathoms and 20 fathoms combined is 2520 inches, I think. So Elder Tess has always said this was the time element for the Sunday Law. So in 2021, there was a time element in the Sunday Law. So in 2021, there was a time element for the Sunday Law, and the answer was 2520. So I like that, but it's probably juggling with numbers, but the answer is 2025 or 2520. So you have time here in Exeter that tells you that in 2025 this problem is going to be solved. That has been my logic. Looking at the Exeter, Exeter tells you what the next waymark, the big waymark, is and what it is.
On Elder Terry's recent, sorry, Emmanuel, go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
On Elder Terry's recent presentation about the Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurgis, putting the dates 272 and 273 aside, she said that Quintus just being July, we just have to put July as the Sunday Law. What do you think? What did you think about the presentation?
Well, that's a whole presentation in itself if I have to answer that. I have some questions for her. Okay, I try to do it quickly. So you have Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurgis. So I don't have much space. So you have Quintus, you have Fabius, you have Maximus Gurgis. So we take Maximus Gurgis, we take that apart and say like Maximus Gurgis means wild water. It is maximum flood. That's how we have used it. And then we go to the Bible and say like, oh, flood is actually a symbol for persecution. It's a symbol of the persecution at the end of the world, at the Sunday Law. So maximum flood is symbol for the Sunday Law. That is what Elder Tess did. So she ran that symbol through the Bible, say like, okay, that means Sunday Law. So let me write that down. So we have wild waters, it's maximum. So, and we go to the Bible, and that gives you the answer. The Bible tells you it is Sunday law. So this is a very short summary of what you do with Maximus Gurgius. So let's go to Fabius. So now we have Fabius. So Fabius, it means being. Basically, it's derived after the word Faba, which means being, and this person is called Fabius because he is an ancestor he's part of a family that grows beans or trades in beans. So what does it mean? Well, and here comes my question. Where do you go to get that answer? Because here you go to the Bible to get the answer. So should we be consistent in going to the source? To what source are you going? So we can run bean through the Bible, and the word bean is in the Bible. You can go through the run bean in the Bible and maybe find an answer. Elder Terry didn't do that. Elder Terry didn't go to the Bible. She now went to, let's say, Greek or Roman history. So she goes to Greek and Roman history. She reads about faba beans. Well, you eat them, you cook them, you bake them, but they're also used in elections. So like, hey, that's interesting. You read about faba beans. They're used in elections or voting situations. So she used that symbol. It's like, oh, faba bean is voting. So now we go to Greek or Roman history and say like, okay, faba beans means voting. So let's say, so it means being. And now we go to Greek or Roman history as the source. So that's the source where we get our answer. So now let's go to Quintus. So now we have Quintus. What does Quintus mean? Well, Quintus it means 5. That's what it means. So where do you go to get your answer? What does 5 mean? You can go to the Bible, and 5, the symbol 5 has a meaning in the Bible. Like several numbers have a meaning. It's a symbol of, let's say, I think 5, you could argue, you have the 5 wise and the 5 foolish, and they are judged. So 5 is a symbol of judgment. Or you have the 5 stones in the hand of David that judge Goliath. Or so you can run through that source. You can run through the Bible, the number 5, and get your answer what 5 means. But in this case, we use 5, so let's say it means. But in this case, we stay within the name and say like, no, 5, in this case, in this name, it means actually July. It means the month this person is born. So, okay, I get it that it's the 5th month and it was the 7th month, but it refers to the time period where this person is born. That was somewhere in the northern hemisphere. Northern hemisphere, it's somewhere in the summer. We call July. So now you stick. So what is the source now? Now you stay within the name. So I'm saying the source is the name itself. So the source of the meaning of 5, the source where we go to get that to get the meaning of that symbol, we stay within the name. So we have 3 different sources to find the answer to the meaning of the name. So we go to the Bible, we go to Greek Roman history, or we stay in the name. And the question is, and that's honestly a question that I have, but it's like, have we done? Is this correct? Can we do that? Have we done that before? Because if you stay in the name, because Elder Terry in her last presentation, and like you said, is she uses Quintus. So like, well, yeah, that means July. Yes, that means July in this name. But Maximus Gurgius, if you stay in the name, does it mean this person got the name Maximus Gorgias because if you look that up, it means that this person had an extravagant behavior or was a little wild in its behavior, or extravagant, or there was another word, but something like that. So this person got this name because of its character, because of its character, its behavior. So if you stay in the name, why did this person get this name? This person got the name Quintus because he was born in July. So that's why we stay in the name. So if we stay in the name, then Maximus Gorgias means wild person or extravagant person. And then being, if we stay in the name, why is this person called Fabius? Because he is part of being traders or being farmers. So I'm not saying that is the answer, but I'm just saying you can get several answers depending on what source you're going to. And for each name, we went to a different source. And I'm honestly questioning, is that the right way to do it? Because yes, it means July. But if you run it through the Bible, it doesn't mean July. It means Joshua, perhaps, or something else. So, well, that's my response or my question that I have on the Quintus Fabius Maximus Gorgias.
Arjan, can I add something on that point? Because Quintus, actually, he was named after his father, who was also named Quintus. And it was very common for people named Quintus in Roman time to be named after a prominent family member. And all of Quintus Fabius Maximus Gorgias's family, not all, but he comes from a long line of Roman consuls. And so it was common for Quintus to be named after a prominent family member, which in this case he was. And there doesn't need to be any assumptions made on how Quintus was named. All we need to do is look at history. It wasn't because he was born in July. It was because he was named after his father. Thanks, that's all.
Okay, thank you. So you're saying the connection July is incorrect in this case?
In this case, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, everybody. We keep going on, which is really good, but we do have a time limit, which we've gone over, and I really appreciate, Arjan, your patience with staying with us, with the good discussion and the sharing of ideas and understandings in a unified way, and that we're all learning together. So if you wouldn't mind closing in prayer, and then we'll have a final hymn.
Dear Lord, I come before you this evening for me, afternoon for my friends, saying, Lord, that we are so thankful for being together this Sabbath. To me also, it was really a blessing to study with my friends from America. I pray that you continue to speak to our hearts, that you will be the preacher that continues to repeat those things that we studied in our hearts and minds, so that we will be able to settle into the truth, that we find the truth. We pray, Lord, we're thankful, Lord, for the discussions we could have, the good questions, the patience that my friends had with me in my perhaps sometimes long answers. Lord, I pray that we all will be able to find the truth and settle into the truth intellectually and spiritually, and that we will be growing together. Lord, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for leading out and guiding our discussions, and I pray that you continue to bless us as a movement, as we move forward in finding and developing the truth. In Jesus' name, we praise your name. and pray in Jesus' name. Amen.